it's Sarah here from BJC Health, coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for showing an interest in one of our educational events. You're about to watch part one, so enjoy the event. If you've got any questions about the content, then please consider joining BJC Connect, where you can access all of our facilitators live. Otherwise, please consider leaving a comment and we'll do our best to get back to you.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about fat and inflammation and aging tonight. I want to try and not talk as long as I normally do. I really want this to be an opportunity where you can ask as many questions as possible. So please fill up that chat room with all of your questions. Errol will be watching those and then he'll let me know what kind of subjects or what kind of questions that you have. So I get a lot of questions about fats and is it okay to eat fats and how much fat, and does it really cause inflammation, and does all fat cause inflammation, and ways to slow down the aging process. I think that's something that a lot of people are interested in. So I'm going to start by saying that some fat is good, and I'm sure that you all know that, especially those of you that join me twice a week on our workshop nights. We talk a lot about good fats and why they're helpful for us, and even how they're linked with anti-inflammation. But we very basically, we need fat because we need to keep warm. So a certain amount of fat is good for our bodies. We use fat as energy, so it's one of the body's ways of using energy. Carbohydrate is the preferred source of energy, but fats contain double the amount of calories per gram as carbohydrate and protein. So obviously in the primitive years or the hunter-gatherer years, getting some fat was really important for when there was famine. So it provided a really good energy source. Fat actually helps us make hormones that help our body function. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate when we went through the 90s and the early 2000s. I became a dietitian in the year 2000. There was a very big 10 to 15 years before I graduated that was all about trying to have almost zero fat. Everything was 97% fat-free. And actually, as a population in Australia and a lot of countries, we put a lot of weight on in that 10 to 15 years when we tried to have zero fat. And that was the trend, avoid at all costs. So it's actually quite important to have some fats for hormones and for your body to function efficiently. Some fats like omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids, the ones that are dubbed the good fats or the healthy fats, are actually essential fatty acids, and we cannot make those ourselves. So we need to get essential fatty acids out of our food. So again, a good reason not to completely avoid fats altogether. And they're also important for helping us to absorb what we call the fat-soluble vitamins. So vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, your body cannot make these vitamins, and fat actually helps them to absorb into our system and to help store them. So we also need some fats for those. So one of the myths around fats is that we're supposed to avoid them. And we now know, especially now more than ever, that having some level of fat in your system is good. We used to, there was a period of time when I just became a dietitian that everybody was counting fat grams. And, you know, programs would say, try not to eat more than 30 grams of fat per day if you're a female, and up to 50 grams for a male, so that you're trying not to have more than 30% of your calories, total calories from your day, that no more than 30% would come from fat. And out of that, only 10%, no more than 15% would come from saturated fat, which is the fat that is called the bad fat, which we'll talk about in a moment. That, to a certain extent, is still true. We still, for people who want to listen or want to know a little bit about macros and the breakdown of fat to carbohydrate, to protein, we still might say about 30% of your intake is from fat, where we want the majority of it to be from good fats and still only that smaller percent to be from saturated fat. But we don't necessarily count how many grams of fat we have now per day. We don't keep counters. Some people like to use apps like MyFitnessPal or Easy Diet Diary, which does, if you're logging a food diary on these apps, it will actually calculate some of these things for you. But to get results for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, whether it's weight management, blood sugar control, cholesterol lowering, you don't need to know all of your grams for everything to be successful. If we follow a certain pattern of eating and we veer towards the good fats, your calories tend to take care of themselves if there's a little bit of mindfulness around portions. So some fats are good. When we have too much fat, when we eat too many calories from fat, or even too many calories from protein and carbohydrate, your body will find a way to store these extra calories in your body fat cells. And it's when this happens, and especially when we increase our fat around the middle of our body, around our waistline, where we know from research that that increases your risk then of heart disease, diabetes, blood pressure, even cancer. And that is what we want to try and avoid, is that we are eating for every individual the healthiest you possibly can, where you're trying to manage your weight, your sugar levels, and your heart health. Not only that, if too much body fat accumulates, then we're more likely to get tired, we're more likely to experience joint pain, we're more likely to potentially have snoring, which is not so good. And so there needs to be a little bit of a balance between how much we eat and what we get in terms of our essential fatty acids. So there are 4 types of fats in our diet, and you've probably heard of these before. So we have the monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, saturated fat, and something we call trans fats. The mono and the polyunsaturated fats are the ones we like. They're your good fats. Saturated fat is the one we don't like. It's the unhealthy fat. And trans fats are the ones that we really don't like, to the extent that now trans fats have been banned in the US to be used in a lot of food products, as well as even in Australia, I think, and across many countries. You will still get residue saturated fat in certain foods, and we'll talk about those, but we really want to avoid trans fats. What do each of those fats do? So mono and polyunsaturated fats, you can usually identify these because they are liquid at room temperature. They help you with reducing your cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, and to a certain extent, some of the good fats will help you increase your HDL, which is your good cholesterol. So the LDL, the bad cholesterol, low density lipoproteins they're called, they're the ones that like to sit in your artery walls and build up, which is part of the risk factor for having a heart attack or having a stroke. Your HDL, which are your high density lipoproteins, these are the good ones. They can actually come into your artery walls and pick up some of the LDL and take it back to your liver for reprocessing. So it's actually quite good to have a lot of HDL around. Then we have something called triglycerides. These are your bad fats. So I like to call them the 3 stooges: the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is the HDL, The bad is the LDL, and the ugly is the triglycerides. Now, the triglycerides are the ones that do things behind your back, which is why we don't like them. At least the LDL, they kind of dance around and they go into your artery walls and they say, hey, I'm LDL, I'm going to clog you up, and I'm being very transparent about what I'm going to do. What the triglycerides try to do is they try to beat up the HDL and make the HDL less effective, which can actually help you to clear some of the fats out of your artery walls and take them back to your liver for processing. And your trans fats will increase your triglycerides. And your saturated fats will also contribute to increasing partly your triglycerides, but definitely your LDL cholesterol. So what do we call the mono and the polyunsaturated fats? So we have things like cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil, tahini. A lot of those oils are your polyunsaturated fat oils. Olive oil is a monounsaturated fat. We have things like fish, which is high in omega-3. We have flaxseed, walnuts, chia seeds. These are all high in poly and monounsaturated fats. And you have omega-3 and you have something what we call omega-6. So some of you would have heard me talk a lot about omega-3 fatty acids, particularly that come from fish, as well as walnuts being one of the best plant-based proteins that have omega-3, flaxseed. Omega-3s can be really good for anti-inflammatory effect. They've been linked to improving heart health. They've been linked to improving cognitive health. They're good for eyes. They have been linked to better management of diabetes. So omega-3s have had a lot of airtime, I guess, over the last 10, 15 years, because we know that they have helped to improve a lot of areas of health. What people don't know of a little bit more is that omega-6 oils that are good, so they're healthy fats, they've been linked with lowering cholesterol. But if we have too many omega-6 oils, when they end up being a lot higher than our omega-3 oils, we get an imbalance in the ratio, and that can actually cause more inflammation in your body. So if you are using sunflower oils or safflower oils or corn oils, I definitely recommend that, because we get enough omega-6 oils in a lot of the products that we buy, such as bread or some of our baby sweet foods. If you do have the occasional handful of chips, kettle chips, they all use these polyunsaturated oils. And they will put it all over the front of the bag that it's not going to increase your cholesterol and it's using good oils. But they are actually still linked to inflammation because we end up having too many of them. If you switch to olive oil, it's a monounsaturated fat, it's neutral, and it's not as high in these omega-6s. So trying to think of increasing your fish intake, increasing chia seeds, increasing your walnut intake, those things will help you get a better ratio between this omega-3 and omega-6, which is two of the polyunsaturated fats. So good for us, but we don't want too many of the omega-6. What about saturated fats? They do get a bit of a bad rap. So saturated fats are things like butter. I had one saturated fat thing in my fridge tonight. Good old cream, chicken cream. So cream, ice cream, butter, full fat dairy, cheese, all yummy stuff, coconut and palm oil, fast food, baked goods, so anything to do with cakes and biscuits and chocolate and all of those types of things. Sausages, fat on meat, skin on chicken, all very high in saturated fat. And it is definitely linked to increasing cholesterol. Now, I know that there's been some research over the last handful of years that have talked about a misconception that potentially saturated fat is not as harmful as we thought, and maybe it doesn't really increase cholesterol all that much. Now, I've done some extra reading on that leading up to this talk, and it appears that a lot of the research that was done in that area was supplementing when you already have butter, then taking some other saturated fats and just swapping them around with each other. And so if some of the research that took saturated fat out completely and put the monounsaturated fat and the polyunsaturated fats in, there was a clear decrease in cholesterol. And we've known that for a very long time, even prior to me becoming a dietitian, which is over 2 decades ago now. But some of the research that recently that said that saturated fat is not as bad is when they might have put coconut oil in place of butter. So therefore, there wasn't a massive increase in cholesterol because there was no difference between the type of fat that they used, and people potentially already had quite high cholesterol. So I think coming back to when you hear things, especially that are trendy, that saturated fat is not as bad as we thought. The research methodology, the methods that have been linked to some of this research don't appear to be the way we would want it to be, to really compare what happens to heart health when we reduce saturated fat. Eggs are a slightly different story. I get asked about eggs all the time. Can I have eggs if I have high cholesterol? I'm going to be very honest and say that I still am a little bit cautious. So if somebody's got high cholesterol already, I might say to them, you might want to look at only having 3 to 4 eggs a week. But the research does show that eggs are not as problematic as we thought they were if you have a diet lower in saturated fat. They don't seem to bounce off each other because eggs are high in natural cholesterol. So if you're eating a diet high in saturated fat and you're eating a lot of eggs, the combination of that seems to be problematic. But if you're having a diet lower in saturated fat and you're having eggs, it does appear now that we can say that it doesn't seem to affect cholesterol as much as we once thought it did. There's a little bit of personal variation, of course, for individual people. Saturated fat can be linked to inflammation, and I know for a lot of my clients that have arthritis, when they reduce the saturated fat in their diet, they increase their anti-inflammatory foods. They may also be mindful about decreasing sugar intake and some other components of their food or alcohol. They tend to get a better result in terms of pain reduction. That's not to say that they can come off medication, but there is a difference for a lot of people quite noticeably, that they feel better and have less symptoms when they reduce the saturated fat in their diet. So trans fats, like I said, have been banned in many countries now. This is when they take a liquid oil and they chemically make a change to that oil by putting in hydrogen atoms, and it changes the oil into a solid. Now, trans fats were first developed because they helped to stop liquid oils from going rancid, from going off. And they were very useful in pastries and bakery goods, and the way that they cooked and the way that they could be stored. So basically they're called partially hydrogenated oils. And it is these oils that have been found to be very detrimental to heart health, especially. So if you buy products off the shelf, if you buy frozen meals, even if you buy cakes or biscuits and things, it's worthwhile to check the label. Often under where it says fats, there will be a breakdown of saturated fat, and sometimes they'll put trans fats. And what you'll often notice now is that if trans fats is on a product, it will say less than 1 or less than 0.5 or less than 0.1. You want to keep your trans fats as low as possible. So how do we look at what we should do to help navigate reducing saturated fat, but still getting the benefits from the good fats, the essential fatty acids, as well as the fact that it can keep you full? Fats can be very good to help you with weight management because you tend to feel more satiety in your body. Fats can actually help you with blood sugar control, because when we eat fats and protein, they actually make it harder for the sugar to absorb into your blood system all at once. So there is some research that's very new at the moment that says that if you have higher blood sugar, please try and eat some protein and some fats and some vegetables before you eat your carbohydrates at your main meals, because it can really help you dampen your sugar, and so you won't get the spikes if you eat your carbohydrate first or you eat too much carbohydrate. So fats can be really helpful. So for those of you that listen to me a lot about anti-inflammatory eating, I've got a few of my favorites here with me tonight. So we want to try and eat in a Mediterranean style, because it helps with anti-inflammation and it helps with a lot of the chronic diseases that we have in the Western world. Not only that, when it comes to aging, inflammation increases the aging process, or it can accelerate, that's a better word, the aging process. And from what I have read, genetics might only be part of 25% of whether you age quicker or slower, or you look younger like your mum or your grandmother did. 75% approximately is about your lifestyle. It's about how you eat, how you sleep, how you stay hydrated. So these are the things to try and focus on, so that if genetically you feel like, oh, everyone in my family looks older at a younger age, you can't control that part. But what you can make a decision on is how you nourish your body, how you sleep, how you stay hydrated, how you manage stress, and whether you use sunscreen, because that's important for skin health and aging. So when we have too many fats in our body, or if we are storing more fat than we would like, what happens is we get metabolic imbalances. The research tends to say that it will reduce our lifespan. We have an increased risk of disease, and it actually impacts the cellular processes in your body that are very similar to aging. So that's where the acceleration of aging can come. You end up with more inflammatory cytokines, which is not great for aging or for reducing the risk of chronic disease. So what can we do? One of my favorite things is try and use olive oil as your preferred oil. And please ask me questions about, I always get questions about types of oils, coconut oil, rice bran oil. Ask me about those if you're interested. But your preferred oil, ideally, from a Mediterranean point of view, is to use olive oil. Please try and use cold pressed olive oil. It means that there's been no heat used. It retains a lot more of its antioxidants, and it's a better quality of product. And the cold pressed olive oils tend to have a higher smoke point, which is one of the things I get asked about a lot. Should I not cook with olive oil because it's got a lower smoke point? And I think that's a little bit as well, a little bit of a myth, that we can't cook with olive oil because it will go bad, it will turn bad. So one of the things to remember is that something like trans fats, these are chemically produced fats. So using a liquid-based oil, if you happen to overcook it a little bit, it's not going to turn into a trans fat. It might not be beneficial to overcook your oil, but it's not going to turn into a trans fat. Look for having good fats in avocado. I've got a beautiful half avocado here. Okay. Also high in lots of other vitamins and minerals. Please.
Mon, can I stop you there for a minute?
Yes.
Because we've got questions piling up, and I was trying to wait for a time, but we've got some things, and everyone, I'll get through all your questions, except we have a few on oils.
Yes.
And I'll go in sort of the order. So first of all, since you were talking olive oil, what about olive oil spray?
Yes, so olive oil spray is good if you're trying to not maybe have as many calories from oil, but don't be afraid to use actual olive oil.
Okay. What happens if you're frying?
Okay, so if I'm frying at home for my family of 5, I still use olive oil. The only time I switch to maybe something like a rice bran oil is if I'm doing a traditional Slovakian schnitzel, which happens, a few times a year, and I'm cooking for a much bigger group where I know that the oil might get a little bit hotter and I'm going to use it for longer. But if I'm doing a stir fry, if I'm cooking a quick fish in a little bit of olive oil, if I'm doing any of my meats or making bolognese for the kids, it's all with olive oil. Yeah. The smoke point of olive oil is somewhere between, I've read different numbers, it's somewhere between 375 degrees Celsius and 400 and something. It's not as low as people think it is. And when you're cooking home cooking and it's not industrial, you're not going to use it, you're not going to have it at really high heat for a long period of time.
Okay, excellent. Waitik, I hope that also answers your question. Someone said they've heard that a tablespoonful of olive oil is good.
Yes, it's definitely part of the Mediterranean style diet. So they will often, in all of the Mediterranean countries, often that raw olive oil is put on salad, and it is one of the things that they think has been very protective for heart health in the Mediterranean countries, who have some of the lowest incidences of heart health.
Okay, we'll stick to oil, and I know you showed the avocado just then. What about avocado oil?
Yeah, so avocado oil, also try and get that as cold pressed avocado oil. It's actually quite similar to olive oil in terms of its properties and its smoke point, etc. So you can cook with it. Lots of people use it again in salad. It has a different flavor. So for a lot of people, they like to change it up.
My video there as well.
And it has some good anti-inflammatory properties as well. So avocado oil is good. Sometimes a little bit of peanut oil, rice bran oil. These are probably the ones that are the most popular. A little bit of sesame oil sometimes if you're doing a nice stir fry.
Okay. People have just started listing oils: mustard oil, macadamia oil, peanut sunflower oil.
Okay, so all of those are okay in small amounts. It's the sunflower oil for me personally that I would say, if you're using that as your main oil, I would switch that out, because that's the one that's higher in omega-6, where research is starting to show that if you have too much omega-6, it could end up becoming inflammatory because your ratio between omega-6 and omega-3 ends up too far apart. And so that's not so great from an holistic point of view. So switch to olive oil being one of your main ones, and then use the others because they're nice for different flavors.
So you've just finished watching part 1 of one of our recent educational events. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you'd like to access part 2, then you need to sign up for BJC Connect. It's a free platform where you can access not just the recordings of past events, but also access a whole range of upcoming future events and access our team of facilitators live. All of the details that you need to join BJC Connect are now flashing up on your screen. Otherwise, like our staff, subscribe if you'd like to see more information from BJC Health. Look forward to seeing you in an event soon.